Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new and different hobby cheating video. So today it's just going to be me, and we are going to talk about, it's going to be a hobby cheating Q&A. So instead of having any specific topic, I have the Q&A on. So if you're watching this live, you can ask questions. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to drop your questions down below in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them or pick them up for the next video. If they're a little too lengthy to answer in the comments, I'll do it that way. But if you've got questions live, make sure when you join, you hit the little Q&A button in the corner that lets you do that. It's somewhere in one of these corners, and then you can ask questions. I've got that up. So feel free to put in any hobby-related questions you've got. If people like this, if people you respond, I'll do these every so often, and it'll be like a more focused paint-a-sode that you can have on, and we can discuss technique and stuff like that. So again, Q&A is on. Drop those questions in. If you don't have the Q&A thing on yours, you just need to join with it on. So when you join, you just need to hit the button into the Hangout. Okay, so it should be in like the bottom left or top right or something like that. I don't know which direction I'm pointing versus where you're looking. So we'll see how this goes. It's going to be a fun little experiment. We're all going to go on this ride together. As I said, you can feel free to drop in the questions in the Q&A. If you're watching this later, not live, just put them down below. I'll either answer them in the comments or I'll take them for next time. All right, so let's get right into it. Anybody who wants to start dropping a question, do so. I have a few questions already that people had left. So I'm just going to start by answering those, and then I'll start taking the questions as they come in. Fair enough. All right, so first question that came in was, what do you find to be the most challenging part of the hobby? So that's a good question. I don't know that I can help anybody specifically with the answer, but I'll still give my opinion on it. And that is avoiding the right color is done syndrome. Everybody has this to a different degree, but especially when you're painting for competition and you're in like 20, 30, 50 hours into a fig, I think it can really be the case where you can just sort of feel like the right color is done. And you're just like, I finished with this. I don't know what more I could do with it. And my best way to tackle that is set the fig to the side. Like, don't feel like you've got to finish it right there. I always believe in having two projects at any given point in time. So that's one of the ways I always stay, like one of the ways I complete as much as I do is because I'm always working on two things. I might not be actively working on them at every second. I'm not like painting one, putting it down, painting another. I mean, that would be insane. But I always have like a second project that's, primed, ready to go in some state. There's nothing else I need to do. It's already been cleaned. It's already been good. It's ready to go. And it's sitting off to the side. So if I get frustrated with one, if I start to get that sense that the right color is done, I can just set that to the side, walk away, sleep on it tonight, whatever, pick up something else. And I usually try to make sure the other project isn't also as serious. Maybe it's a more fun thing. So for example, as a living proof of this, right now I'm working on this TGG2 mini, which is going to be a competition piece. And she's in all this very, very like highly detailed non-metallic metal purple armor. And so it can be like, it can be a bit, I don't know, it can be a bit defeating, I guess is what I'd say. So over to the side, I have this little guy, Nibbles, my Arcadia Quest bunny rabbit. And I just kind of mess with him whenever I'm bored. Because he's not for a competition. He's just for fun. He's a fun, angry bunny rabbit. Look at him. He's adorable. So when I get bored or when I need a change of pace, I just grab him and work on him. So there you go. That's my advice on that one. All right. YouTube newbie says, is this working right, Vince? I have the Q&A here in the Hangout, but I have to watch the stream on YouTube. I don't know, man. I'm not sure what the answer is there, but yes, it is working, right? I can see your question, so you clearly can type it in. Hopefully you can also see what I'm saying. If you can't, that's a problem, but I don't know. But there you go. Yes, you have to be in the you have to be watching the Hangout to have the Q&A. Okay. All right. So let's see what else we've got. So Mickey Jenver says, I also have the same problem. You can only do Q&A through Google, but it can only be played through YouTube. Yeah, so I guess I'm making you all do this in a weird way. I apologize. I'll look into it and see if there's a better and smarter way I can do it for the future. This was just the most direct way I could do it now. All right, so Mickey says, I have just invested in Master's Brush Cleaner because my brushes don't last as long as they should. What is your approach to brush maintenance? That's a great question. Brushes are never going to last forever. I pretty exclusively use like Winsor & Newton Series 7. My local game shop has them, so I get them. Some people don't like say that there's a decline in quality. I don't know that that's the case. They're still just as perfect to me. They're sable, but they have just the right amount of springiness. If you have Master's Brush Cleaner, just so everybody can see what she's talking about, I have mine as well. I mean, this is the gold standard. There we go. Of brush cleaners. You can get this super cheap on Amazon or something. This is what you should own, right? So buy this. The answer is I don't take as good care of my brushes as I should, probably. But, I mean, that's probably true for all of us. Use the cleaner. I also make sure to rinse them very thoroughly. I do something that I would not recommend anybody else do. So I'll give bad advice if you really want it. I'm going to give the advice telling you straight up front, don't do this. But I use a little bit of watered down acetone to very carefully and quickly wipe my brushes every so often. And then I use the brush cleaner to clean them off and re-oil them. I'm sure that that's incredibly destructive. What happens to my brushes over time is they just get smaller and thinner because you lose hairs. I watched an interesting comment from Marika Reimer, who won the painting competition at Gen Con, that says she values the fact that her brushes lose bristles and get thinner and thinner. She keeps them around as detail brushes. So as they start to lose brushes and get tighter and tighter, she continues to work them and clean them and draw that point out. And then eventually they become her hyper detail brushes. I thought that was a pretty good idea. So there you go. Maybe that's the way to help. But yeah, the answer is, the real answer is this. Don't mix paint with your good brushes. So like when you have a good brush, don't mix paint with it. Like stir something in a palette. Don't ever let paint get up into this part of the brush right here, down into the ferrule. Okay, so don't get a really nice brush into really watery ink or paint or something like that and just dip it in there. You should be trying to make sure that paint never crosses the halfway point on your brush, and just enough to fill the belly of the brush, but no deeper. And don't use good brushes for crappy purposes you don't need good brushes for. Never use a good brush when you're dry brushing, when you're applying a heavy wash, when you're working on extremely rough textures that you don't need fine control for. Keep crappier brushes around. Use as big a brush as possible at all points in time. A good Winsor Newton size 1 will do everything except eyeballs. I can do incredibly precise detail with this because I only use it for that kind of work. I don't screw it up. You don't need a small brush in almost if this is the color, and I need to paint 3 shades within this line, and that line is like, the size of this brush tip. So that's the only other time it comes out. I hope that helps. There you go. Okay. YouTube newbie says in Britain we get our servants to wash our brushes. That's a good deal. All right. Okay, so there you go. So that's all the questions for the moment. So feel free to drop in some more questions. Yes, it is working. Hopefully everybody can drop your questions in on the Q&A and also be watching for the answers. But I'll move while I'm waiting on some more questions to come in. I'll jump back to the pre-questions that I had. All right. If there was one proud nail in any of my armies I could fix, what would it be? Just one? That's an insane question. One of the most important aspects of being a better painter is to hate what you paint. And by that I simply mean, I don't mean that in a negative way. That sounds harsher than I really mean it. I just mean you should never be satisfied. If you finish something and your first thought is, that's perfect, you're wrong. Because it's not. The the answer is you could have done better. So submit your work out there for other people to evaluate, other people who hopefully know what they're talking about. Don't just show it to like your significant other who knows nothing about painting. And I commensurately, I don't like most of my old work. Things I painted a year ago, I more or less despise. And I mean that in a fun, jocular way. It sounds more negative than it should be. But it's good to have a healthy distaste for your work, to look at it critically, right? That's the truth of it. So when I look at most of my armies, I think to myself, I wish I could have done that better. I wish I could have blended that more. I wish I had taken more time on that. I wish I had known this particular technique with working metal. Like an easy example to directly answer the question is with my Tomb Kings, most of them were painted when I was still using garbage, regular gold paint, which I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole now. The only gold paints I will touch at the moment are basically the Vallejo metal color stuff, or the Vallejo liquid gold, which is an alcohol-based paint that's a real pain in the butt to work with. I did just order some new paints, some Dark Star golds from the UK, so there'll be a product review coming for that very soon. I'm very excited about them. They look really good, so we'll see how that turns out. But I'd love to go back and redo all that gold and do the proper shading on it and highlighting and stuff like that, but I'm never going to do it. So there you go. All right. Okay, so Mickey says the problem stemmed from her painting everything with a 2-aught brush. The problem frustrating me is a kink in the very tip of it. I think it's from using the wrong brush size. Yes, it is. Like, stop that, Mickey. Come on. You know, so James Wappel, who's again just an amazing miniature painter, one of the best, does his base coats with a size 8. A size 8. You could paint a house with that. Right now, he doesn't do his detail work with that, but he still stays big. If you give yourself a good 1 or even a 0, you really, if you take good care of it and only use it for that stuff. Don't use it to base coat. Don't use it to do like rough, you know, texture or something. Like if you've got a metal model and it's got hair, that's like really rough texture that's going to destroy your brush when you're like dragging it across it. You can do it. Like I'm telling you, you can get extreme detail. Like you can see the little white line. I don't know, you probably can't see anything on there, but that's really low quality. But when you look at this, when I'm done with this mini, Mickey, all these lines, everything on here was done with a size 1. Okay, so know that then. All right, use a bigger brush. Your brushes will last longer, and it will also, not that you really need help with this. I mean, I'm preaching to one of just an absolutely stunning miniature painter who doesn't need my advice. But what I would say, Mickey, is you already have incredible brush control. If you force yourself to use a bigger brush, it would get even better, because it forces, using a bigger brush forces you to actually develop your brush control. So there you go. All right. How do you properly use a Grelin Earth? I used it and it gave me a sad. I wanted big, burly breaks in the earth, and it wasn't what I was hoping for at all. Aha, that's a great question. All right, so it just so happens I've got a stellar answer for you here. All right, so let's talk about a Grelin Earth or Martian Iron Earth for a moment. So that's these technical paints from GW, which are both crackle paints, right? In other words, as they dry, so you put on a layer of them, and as they dry, they separate and form cracks, right? Okay, that's what they're supposed to do. And this one, you use it for like the Skitarii, Mars stuff. The other one just kind of is a brown, deserty color. I will say first off, this one is a better crackle paint. They improved the recipe. This Martian Iron Earth gives you bigger cracks than a Grelin Earth. So number one, get rid of the Grelin Earth and get Martian Iron Earth instead. Okay, so that's the simplest thing. 2 is, however much you think you need to use of this, use more. You want a physical layer of this stuff. And when I say that, I mean like, did you ever have a friend who really loves like mayonnaise on a sandwich, and you see them spread the mayonnaise on the sandwich, and you're like on the bun, and you're like, oh my God, do you have enough mayonnaise? How much mayonnaise are you going to put on that sandwich? because it's just like it's so much that the bun slides over the top of the burger or something. Yeah, that's the amount you have to use. Okay, too much. To the point where this is a silly amount to sell this in. This is the stupidest thing. These should come in the massive wash pots, bare mins, because this is a joke. You burn through these. Now, here's the third trick. So one, switch to Martian Iron Earth and just paint it, because you can paint that stuff easy enough when it's done. Two, use more. Three, if you really want big, sweet cracks, okay? If you're really trying to get like massive separation, all right, well then here is where the secret tricks come in. I'm so excited about this because this is something I've never really seen anybody talk about this. I'm sure other people know. I'm not trying to say that. It just happens to be something I figured out on my own. All right, so here we go. Okay, so this is Vallejo Dark Earth. Vallejo makes a bunch of these. They're sort of a basing grit. They're sort of a basing grit. Like if I did a product review on these, I use these for most of my bases. There's a bunch of different ones. There's like a desert sand and stuff like that. You can kind of see if you can see in there. It's like a mud. It just looks like mud. Okay. Anyway, it's all wet, and you put it on your base, and it gives you a natural grit. You can mix in other grit like stone and stuff like that. But here's your trick of the week. Okay, put this on your base. So I would take this base. I would lay down a layer of this Vallejo Dark Earth or whatever. Okay, so go. Yeah, good. So he says he has dark and brown earth. Awesome. You're prepped to go then, Desmond. So you lay down a layer of this stuff. Okay. Now let it set for like 5 minutes. Not long. Just enough so it's not like still overtly wet on the top. Okay. Take your Martian Iron Earth or your Grelin Earth or whatever, and very carefully spread a layer of it on top. Okay, while this is still wet. All right, and then just put it to the side. Now, what's going to happen is those things have different drying rates, right? And you've covered the one with the other. And you can put it under something hot, like I have a lamp I dry stuff under to make this stuff dry faster, but you could just let it sit. You could use a hairdryer, you could put it under something, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you play with the different drying methods, you'll get different effects. So you can play around with that. What's going to happen is as the dark earth or whatever dries, it's going to shrink, because that's what this stuff all does. This stuff shrinks as it dries, as the liquid leaves it. Okay, and what that's going to do is pull apart this stuff on the layer above it. So if you have a thick layer of this, you'll get natural big cracks that then get ripped and pulled apart by the dark earth underneath. And what you get is these massive crags. I don't have a fig that has it handy. I did do this on a couple of figs for my silver tower set. I really liked how it turned out. So that's my advice. There you go. Cool. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. All right. And so, yeah, you could put that stuff over, if you want to put it over top of other things, like you could do both these on top of cork to get really cracked, craggly rock. You could mix it in with other stuff, whatever you want to do. Okay. Very good. Keep those questions coming. Good questions. And if you don't know where the Q&A is, it's on the original Hangout. You just have to join in and hit the little Q&A option. You can also just leave a comment on the video if you want. I will also be checking that, and I can also answer questions in there. Okay, so any of those things are fine. Just get them to me, and I'll make sure to answer them. All right. I don't know how to say that name. I'm going to say Fainir. I'm going to guess it's Fainir. All right, if I'm wrong, Fainir, you can correct me, but I think that's how I'm saying it. So Fainir said, are you planning to rebase any of your square-based models to round? No. I don't care enough. I don't like working on old stuff. Once something's done, it's done. I generally don't go back and work on anything that exists. That's in the rear view. I don't live in the past. Everything new I've done, I'll generally base in rounds. When I work on additional models for old square-based armies, I keep them on squares. There you go. If you want to rebase your army, if that's a thing you're wanting to do, I would highly recommend the mingle method, as I'll call it, which is to take your square base, okay? And this is a bad example because these cav bases are terrible because they have this stuff underneath. But take your square base and take your trimmers and you trim off the sides here, just this part, okay? So what you end up with is just a flat rectangle or square or whatever, and then you just set that onto a new round base, right? So you just, I would trim off these sides, and then it would lay flat against this base, and then you just put some more of your same basing material around and kind of smooth it together. Pretty fast and easy. So there you go. That would be how I would do it if I was going to rebase. I think that's the best way to do it because you're not pulling miniatures off, you're not breaking anything, you're just literally snipping the bottoms of what was black plastic off, and it maintains a nice consistent scheme as long as you know what you did for your original basing material. It's fast and easy. Okay. All right. Next up. Okay. So how can you speed your painting? It takes me forever to paint and not on such a high level. So Omri asked this question. Well, I've spent about 50 videos in hobby cheating exploring that very concept, but I'll try to give my best tips right now. Okay, best tips is the following for how to speed your painting. One, do more work in the prep. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of finishing time. There's an zenithal highlight every single thing I paint, period. Most of the time, I quickly give them a black wash with Vallejo model wash for gray and dark vehicles. It's dark gray. It's perfect. I talk about this in preparing for your best paint job. And then I give a nice light dry brush and dry sand. Now, that takes some time, but it's minimal. How long does it take to run some stuff over with an airbrush or a rattle can, to quickly wash, and then to do that fast dry brush? I don't know, 10 minutes? Okay. But what then ends up happening is all my highlights and placements and edges are picked. It's so easy because when I come in with a layer color, I work in very thin paints. So even my base paint is going to be fairly thin. Not glazed or anything, but thinner. So I use the thinness and the transparency of the paint to help me, because then what I get out of the gate is natural shading from light to dark. So instead of taking time building the whole highlight, what I tend to be doing is just building the extreme highlight and shading down the extreme dark, and I'm done. Okay, for like non-competition pieces. I mean, on the tabletop, it's going to look fantastic, and it takes you about no time. You can blow through models like that. So, you know, undershading is the best. Like, the biggest crime is just painting up from black miniatures. I don't get it. I don't know why people do it. Makes no sense to me. You're throwing your life away. I can't put it any other way. If you doing that little bit of pre-shading, thinking about undershading more, I think, is the fastest way you can speed along in general your painting. That is to say, if you want to set up a color, think about what's going underneath it. Don't try to just slam that color on there and hope that you get it there. Use things like glazes and undershading to your advantage. Another simple piece of advice is, you notice I've pulled like 17 things off the wall as I'm standing here talking. Everything I need for my hobby is within this amount of reach. There is nothing I use that I can't get within arm's length. Okay, so I don't spend time digging for stuff, which it sounds silly, but it takes a lot of time. If you're like standing up, walking over, getting in a shelf, getting something out, finding the right paint, walking back, sitting down, standing up, walking over, getting something else. If you're doing all that, I mean, it's time. It is time. And, you know, it's time you don't need to be spending. Just make sure your hobby area is organized. Now, I have the luxury of having this amount of space around me. You may not, But I've seen a lot of people do really brilliant things with small space, like people who have tiny desks, but they go vertical, they go on the walls, keep it all in range. So, you know, organization is good. It will help you out. Let's see. Final thought, final piece of advice would be choose your colors wisely if you want to paint faster to a nice standard. Because certain colors are simply harder to work with and are going to take more time. If you want to paint to, you know, you're trying to get an army out, and you want it to look nice, right? You're not trying to get crap out. Probably don't pick yellow. That's an easy one because yellow is a nightmare. Even over zenithal, it still takes a while to get yellow right. You know, be careful with the colors you choose. Like if you use a proper zenithal and you go with like reds are great. Reds blend very quickly. They're very transparent. If you have the proper zenithal underneath, you can make a red look great instantaneously. So there you go. That's my best. Those are the top things that come to my mind. Obviously, if you're trying to paint big units, you know, do factory line painting, set up the number that you think is appropriate, do one step down the line and then the next step down the line. I mean, that's all obvious stuff. Buy yourself an airbrush. That's an easy one. Just do it. It's the best investment you'll ever make in the hobby, period. It's not a magic wand. It's not cheating. It's just another tool. It's no different than washes or having good brushes or trying different paints or anything else. It's just a tool. Use it. It will make your life ungodly better, especially the first time you do a large monster. Okay. That was a long answer, but it's a rich question. All right. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna pull up some other questions here. We've got more questions. Okay, so James Valdez asks, just diving into AOS, I picked up. Sorry, I'm reading this on my other screen. I apologize for looking askance. I picked up the General's Handbook and I plan on using Chaos Demons, focusing on Khorne units, but there aren't any stats for the units, only points. Do I need to buy the Khorne Bloodbound book for units stats? No, you can get it in the app, or you can get, oh, yep, somebody answered it. Yes, you can get it in the app, or you can get it in the Grand Alliance Chaos book, which if you're going to play a Chaos Army, I would recommend picking up. It's super cheap and very worth it. But yeah, the app is the way to go on your phone. Just grab it. It's the little hammer thing, and it will help. Okay. Let's see. Back to more questions. Melanie M said, I'm not sure where to ask questions. Well, you put them in a place where I can read them, so this is fine. Where you're doing it is just fine. Anywhere where I can see it, in the Q&A, in the thing, on the video, all that's fine. I'm not sure, okay, how do you approach painting larger models, like a dragon or a war machine? Well, that is a fantastic question. Let's pull a couple over here, and I'll tell you how I approached them. Hey, buddy. All right, so this guy. Talk about a paint job I hate. Oh, boy. All right, anyway. So this guy. He's a big model, certainly, the new Vermin Lord. I assume this is something like what you're talking about. So the first thing, I'll walk you through my quick and dirty on any model I paint, because some of the things are just universal. The first thing I do is obviously prep them up, you know. That is to say, clean off, you know, mold lines, stuff like that. Get them ready for paint, right? And then I think about sub-assemblies. Now, in the case of this big boy, he's open enough that I didn't need to sub-assemble anything. In other words, there's nothing really hidden with him. He's all really, every part of the model I can get at easily. But if you can see the screaming bell, like right here, right? Turning, it's so weird, it's backwards. The screaming bell over there. That I did all in sub-assemblies. So my first point would be, think about your sub-assemblies. Is any part of this model going to be hidden by anything else? Especially in big models, it's very easy to do. If so, leave them separate and put it together at the end. Second thing I do is just Google images of the model. Google image search is your best friend. Always start with Google image search. And you're not trying to copy anything anybody did, but look at what other people have done. Draw inspiration. There's no reason not to. There's a world of good painters out there painting the models you're working on. See how they did it. See if you see color combinations that work or don't work, that you like or don't like. Use that to make your own sort of story on it, right? The next thing I do is, so if the model's all prepped up, I've got my color scheme, you know, decided on the big boy. I don't ever put them on the base. Big things like this are always painted on something else I can hold. So the spray can lid is your friend. You'll notice I have this wire running around the edge. That's to hold down feet so I can hold big heavy models. It's just a simple piece of wire. It's tucked up underneath. That's how I hold them in place. Then we zenithal prime them. So black all over, gray at a 45-degree angle, white at a 90-degree. Then I start laying down colors. Now with a large model, like I said, with an airbrush, if I can get at it and do a good amount of it with an airbrush, I will. I'll start as much of it as I can. So I'll lay down some flesh tones, I'll lay down some basic shading, I'll lay down some basic highlights or something, whatever the thing happens to be. Then from there, you just keep going with the brush, just bang away at it. Again, the key with that is you need to think about technique application is a huge deal on big miniatures. When should I be dry brushing? When should I be washing? When should I be using glazes? When should I be using layering? So because you're going to need to use, often those huge models are going to require a combination of all of those things. So don't just think about what colors you want to do. Think about the effects you're trying to achieve and what techniques should be applied to achieve those ends. Okay? That's my thought process. Hopefully that answers your question. If you want me to dive deeper on any of that, throw the comment in there, or the question. All right. More questions. So many more questions. Sorry, I'm just bringing them up here. Okay. All right, so here's a good one. Any quick tips for someone who sucks at picking out colors? I've tried the color wheel and have to repaint after deciding. Well, I do have a great answer for you on this one. Picking out colors is always a really challenging part of painting a miniature because you need to, you know, like good colors make a miniature work. Bad colors, no matter how good your paint is, are going to ruin the thing. It's really that simple. So he says, I try to draw inspiration from others, but I like having my stuff at least a bit unique. Basically, can you tell me how to be at least awful at picking colors in a few words? Sure. Sure I can. Yeah. Okay. Well, one, don't be afraid to draw inspiration from others. I know you said you want your stuff to be a bit unique. Let me let you in on a secret. Nothing you paint is really that unique. Again, I'm not trying to smash your hopes and dreams, but there's like 10 million people in the world painting miniatures. If you throw 10 million monkeys on a typewriter, you know, on typewriters, you eventually get War and Peace, right? So like somebody's always going to have done what you did. Uniqueness has very little value in the world because it's false. Now, that being said, I take your meaning. What you really mean is you want to feel like you had creative input into the decisions. And I get that. That's totally legit. So I think in that case, still start with your Google image search and find the colors that you like and just go from there. But I'm going to go a step farther on you. I'm going to help you out. Get yourself any blank notebook, like a thick, heavy paper notebook. Okay. Like, you know, like a folio or something, right? That just has blank white heavy painting paper. You can get it at any like art store, craft store, you know, big box store. You can probably get them at Target or something. You know, it doesn't really matter. Just something that's got thick, heavy paper inside it, like a little diary or journal. That's one thing I don't have around me at this moment. Mine's in the other room. And what you can do is find a black and white image of the miniature you're about to paint. Print it out on a piece of paper. Stick it into that folio. Okay? Just tape it down, glue it down on the page. Grab the colors you think you're going to use and paint the miniature picture on the page. Don't take a long time. Be messy. Be messy as all get out. You're not trying to like carefully paint the lines. No, you're just like dip purple, 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 purple. Good. Okay, then I'm going to put in some blue blue here, blue goes here, blue goes here, blue, blue, blue. And then I'm going to use some gold, gold, gold. That piece is gold, that piece is gold, done. It should take 5 minutes. If you're spending longer than 5 minutes, you're taking too long. Because, and then if you want to, maybe even throw in a highlight or two, right? Just go like, okay, I'm going to take that purple. Don't worry about your actual highlights. Just take that purple, mix it with some white, slam a couple like rough highlights in. Like there'll be a rough highlight here, a rough highlight here, a rough highlight here and here. And then hold it back away from you and look at it. Okay? If it looks good, maybe even squint. I know that's a funny thing to say, but squint at it. Like your eyes tend to fuzz out the detail when you squint. And, or if you wear glasses like me, just take your glasses off and look at it. That'll often achieve the same thing. And then you won't notice the like where you were all messy. But what you will see is just the way the colors are synergizing. And very quickly, you can decide whether or not that's a good paint scheme. In 5 minutes, you pre-painted a whole miniature and you know whether or not the scheme's going to work, right? And this is especially important if you're setting up a template for a whole army. If you're like, I'm going to do a whole, whatever, Zinch force, so it's going to have a bunch of crazy colors. Well, let me pick a Chaos Warrior or something, or I don't care, a Flamer, and you know, I'll do a little test, print out a notebook, and I guarantee you, it will just save so much time, especially on a large army. So there you go. That's my advice. Grab a folio, heavy paper, black and white image, quick, rough 5-minute paint of just like placing colors around and see if you like it. Final quick tip on picking colors. You know, think about things that pop. Dark colors fall back, bright colors come forward. Think about using contrasting warm and cold. That is to say, like, think about your miniature having both warm and cold on it. You know, as an example, so this guy, which is in Tyler Mengel's painting competition right now, up for the People's Choice. If you want to go, and by the way, I didn't like pre-plan this out. I know I've been banging on about this forever. But if you want to go vote, the link is in the original Hangout on Google Plus to the Mengel Miniatures page. But anyway, the real reason I grabbed this guy is because when I talk about colors, the black here is fairly neutral, right? But the blue is this extremely cold blue that goes into white. And then the fiery swords are this yellow and orange, very warm. So they're complementary colors that give a high amount of contrast, but they're also giving you the warm and cold contrast and stuff like that. When you do your colors, think about having your triangle. Where is your triangle? Sit on the miniature, having a triangle of colors. So for example, on this guy, 1, 2, 3, right? There's my triangle. Yeah. Stuff like that. Even a good color scheme can be screwed up by having it placed poorly. So there you go. And yeah, look at the original Google Plus thing and you can find the link to this. Or if you're watching this later, but before tomorrow, that is to say Sunday the 14th, the link will be down below where you can go vote for my little guy. And I would certainly appreciate that. Okay. All right. So, and then Mickey related to this says, do you keep a diary of paint mixes you paint a model? I do, so I can reproduce things that work well. I don't. I'll tell you right now. I'm over-reliant on my memory, which sometimes does work against me. There's a really good app I've been wanting to try where you can record the exact paint mixes that you use and like take a picture of the model and put it next to it. That's pretty cool. Kelly on Kelfrey on Twitter, who paints some really great minis. She does a nice thing where she has like a picture of the mini. She does the quick paint sketchbook thing I talked about, but then as she paints the miniature, she actually like does the blend very quickly on the page and writes down what the paints are. So that's fine. What I have done a few times just to keep things simple is I'll literally just pop my phone and take a picture of the paints all lined up together and then just add a note to the photo of like, this is my dark flesh mix. I have done that if it's like a really complicated mix. So that's pretty easy and not very time intensive. But I don't tend to record everything. That is a flaw. I should start doing it. There you go. It's a good habit to be in. Better miniature painters than myself certainly do it. All right, more questions. Here we go. Sorry, it takes me a minute because I'm searching between all the different places to make sure I cover all the questions. All right, let's see. What products would you recommend for protecting minis? I'm so angry at myself because I just got a new can of this and literally left it upstairs. And as I walked downstairs to do this, I said, well, no one will probably ask about it. I'm not going to run back upstairs and grab it. Funny. The answer is Tester's Dull Coat. If you're going to use a spray, Tester's Dull Coat, not the gloss, Dull Coat. It's more or less the gold standard of varnish. It's quick, it's easy, it's effective. It doesn't tend to fog ever. You still want to watch your humidity. Fogging from varnishing is a matter of humidity, liquid, water, getting trapped in the varnish as it dries. So it gets trapped underneath and frosts the varnish. So you always want to make sure you're in a low humidity environment to varnish. Barring Tester's Dull Coat, I will certainly use just good old-fashioned Vallejo matte varnish. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's perfectly fine. If you're trying to protect a metal mini that's going to be handled a lot, but like isn't really for competition, it's more for play, so you don't need it to be absolutely perfect. Then the answer is you take and you do a fairly good coat of gloss varnish, which has a lot more weight to it. This is thick. And then over it, you shoot your Tester's Dull Coat or your matte varnish to knock that shine off. Because having a miniature finished in this is more or less a crime against humanity. Always. I don't know. There's some exception. If the thing was slime covered, if you were painting Slimer from the Ghostbusters, I would accept this as your final. It's rare. Yeah, so you just cover it with that to then finish it. But yeah, so Vallejo matte varnish, or matte varnish over gloss varnish, or Tester's Dull Coat. Those are my go-to finishers. The Army Painter spray isn't too bad either. Like, it's certainly acceptable. I've never really had a problem with fog on that one. That might be more available at your game store. For the Testers, most friendly local game stores don't carry it. You got to often more go to like a hobby store or something, or you can just order it online. But if you've got the Army Painter one handy, I don't hate that one. It's, again, fine. It's pretty matte in how it dries. So I would say all of those. Okay. All right, next question. Many questions. All right. All right, there's a lot. I will try to get through them all here. G Ambulance Service, when are you going to finally give in and paint some 40K stuff you know you want to? No, I don't. No, I mean, I have nothing against sci-fi. There is no 40K thing that the aesthetic appeals to me. I don't enjoy any of it. It's personal taste. Completely personal taste. That is not me bagging on people who do enjoy it. Love what you love. If you like it, awesome. I'm glad you found something. I painted a massive Imperial Guard army back in, I don't know, 3rd edition. I did Valhallans, which I had like a ice camo pattern. I did like 100 Imperial Guard dudes in groups of 10 and like 8 tanks and all the command units and the heavy weapons and everything. Never again. Never again. There's just not an army out there that grabs me. If they made one that did, sure, I'd do it. I'd buy it just to paint it. I mean, like, a good example is, they made this stuff. TGG2 made the Sisters of Battle in fantasy and sci-fi. Plastic Sisters of Battle. Sisters of Battle are the one aesthetic I love. I don't feel like dropping a house payment on a metal army, and I hate metal figs, as anybody who watches my videos regularly knows. But when I bought this, I bought the fantasy version. I don't care that I don't know exactly what I'm going to use them for. I just like fantasy stuff for painting. Desmond Burke says he uses the Liquitex matte varnish via airbrush. I've heard some people say they use that. I've never tried it. I'll have to give it a shot as well. That sounds cool. I've used some of the other Liquitex products. Like I have some Airbrush Medium and Flow Aid obviously around right here by my airbrush booth. I like those. So I would imagine their varnish is probably also pretty decent. Okay, more questions. All right, bringing up more questions. Sorry for the in-between time while I bring up these questions. One of these days, I'm going to find a better way to do this. Okay. Someone at my GW told me that instead of using varnish, you use watered down PVA glue, like how you would seal a base. It is clear, doesn't fog, and you just brush it on. It's supposed to be 2 or 3 to 1 water to glue. I do not support that. I go for as thin of a layer as varnish as you can. The idea that using brush on glue over your miniatures, that would create a physical layer. Unless you were trying to protect something that you really didn't care about how it looked too much. Look, that could be the most genius thing ever. But I am never going to give that a shot. If somebody else wants to give it a try and send me some results, great. Lots of PVA glues don't dry completely clear. They would have so much thickness to them. I have massive hesitation on that one. I will openly admit I don't know, and I haven't done it, so could be genius, but that scares the bejesus out of me, like in a huge way. All right. All right, keep those questions coming. Omri says, what do you have against dwarves? A lot. Not the fantasy race only. They're boring. Like narratively, I find them boring. They're just dour and gruff, and like they're just not interesting. They sit around. They're so one note. And I'm not saying there's never been. This is all again my opinion. Good Lord, please don't think I'm insulting you personally if you love dwarves. I find them to be one note and boring and more or less just the same in every single way they're done. Yes, they're honorable and tough. Who cares? So is a brick wall. It's not an interesting character. And from an army perspective, they are just the worst. They're a bunch of, small, samey looking guys. They're all just dudes locked in a bunch of steel. When you step back from a dwarven army, what does it look like? It just looks like you painted a bunch of metal. Woo! They're boring. They're boring as all get out. Their helicopters are neat. Those are probably the only interesting thing I've ever thought in their army because it's different. When you step back from like an Empire army, it just pops and glows because it's got these knights and dudes on foot and pantaloons and massive griffin characters and wagons that are toting around, the solar system and just stuff. And it's cool. You step back from a dwarf army 3 feet and it's just like, oh, congratulations on painting a bunch of inch-tall bricks of pewter. Which is why the only interesting models to me ever from the dwarves were the Slayers. Because, excuse me, my dog just knocked something off the shelf. Because they are actually bright and colorful and interesting and orange, which is fun. Who doesn't love orange? There we go. Okay, anyway, there you go. All right, that's what I have against dwarves. All right, grab some more questions here. Yeah, so Daka mentioned in response to the glue thing that glue yellows over time. Something I hadn't even thought of, but yes, absolutely correct. Glue does yellow over time. Again, yet another reason why I'm like, that advice is highly suspect. I'll say that. Okay. Next question. Okay, Vince, I love fantasy, but since the change to AOS, I feel like special characters have really been lost. Characters like Conrad, for example, were just fun heroes. What are your thoughts on the lack of special characters being produced now, miniature-wise? Also, I have trouble sticking to an army, leading to lots of unpainted models. I lose interest in my models unless I start them and stick to it for a week straight. How to combat this? Well, the second question is more the scope of this particular engagement. As to the first one, I will say it doesn't bother me too much. You can make your own special characters, and they are slowly reintroducing some. I mean, Alariel exists and Archeon exists and stuff like that. There's just not as many of them, but I'm sure over time we'll see more. So I would say just give it time. And don't be afraid to make your own. It's your story. Fill it with the characters you love. You know, you just convert a big character and make him someone special and make your own story to it. Now, as to the how do you finish an army? Oh boy, this is a fun one. Okay. Well, you know, how do you do anything lengthy like that, right? The answer is one step at a time. And that's sounds a flippant answer, but I really don't mean it that way. You need to break that into smaller chunks. One good trick is don't buy the whole army at once, unless you got some ridiculously good deal on eBay or something and you have to move, that's fine. But if you can break the purchase up over time, do it. Because then you're painting to the end of the next box, right? I need to get through this box of whatever, of Kurnoth Hunters. When I get those done, get your sense of accomplishment. You set a lot of mini goals. So that's number one. I need to get these 3 Kurnoth Hunters done. Do those 3 hunters. I need to get this unit of, I'm just using Sylvaneth because that's what I have to be working on a lot. I need to get this tree man done. Do the tree man. That's a goal achieved. Set mini milestones and celebrate them. Share your work. Talk about what you're working on. Engage in communities that are out there on Facebook and Google+, places like PMP. Share your work. Get feedback. Because spotters make you keep working. There's a reason why everybody wants to, you know, this goes back to there's the line in the original American Pie, but whatever. Everybody wants to be more in shape for the most part. When you go to the gym, you want to keep working out, but it's easy to quit. That's why you got a spotter there to get those extra reps out of you, right? To make you push yourself just a little more. Sharing your work in a community and getting that feedback is a spotter that inspires you. When somebody says, good work, man, can't wait to see the whole army, it's just pushing you. It's pushing you to keep going. The second thing I would say is don't be a slave to your own army. I often work on 2 armies at once, and I just alternate between the 2. I'll do a unit for one. I'll do an individual figure for another. I'll do an individual, go back and do an individual figure for the other one. I'll do a unit for the other one, or whatever. Maybe not completely even back and forth. Maybe it's 70-30 or 80-20. Who cares? Have a second project to break up your primary army. So that way it's not just like, oh, more rats, more rats, more rats. You know, when I chewed my way through my Skaven army for the second time, I certainly didn't just sit there and paint Skaven for 3 months. It'd be soul crushing. I worked on other things in between. You know, have a second project going. Let that be your palate cleanser, the sorbet in between your rounds of painting. Finally, I would say challenge yourself. So don't just set and celebrate mini milestones. Challenge yourself with techniques. Say on this model, I'm going to try to use some glazing to achieve some really high contrast, or use a color that I don't normally use, or do something more with the basing. I don't care. You can pick any of a million things. It doesn't matter. Just pick a thing and do the thing so that that unit, that model, that whatever becomes not just a rote exercise in going from gray to painted, but an exercise and an exploration in your own self-improvement in the hobby, right? The worst thing you can ever do is let painting become rote. If you just sit there and go, yes, got this unit done, done, got this unit done, done, got this unit done, done, and you're, yes, get it. Well, of course you're not going to finish, because you've turned it into mowing the lawn, and no one's ever excited to go mow more lawn, right? So those are my pieces of advice. Hopefully that all helps. All right, new question. So let's see. Painting my Razorbacks, I've ended up with horrid. You put the quotation marks around it, YouTube newbie, so I will finger air quote your thing there. Horrid brushstrokes. They were base sprayed with Rattlecan Caliban green and overpainted and cleaned up with brush on Caliban green. Okay. These are, oh, okay, so these are your, yeah, Razorback's like a tank, I think. At first I was thinking Razor Dawns. No, that's a Lizardman thing. Got it. Okay, I'm with you now. Yeah, so you got your tank. Okay, so you sprayed it, and then you did some brush. Okay. The brush on has been thinned, of course, but there's still brush strokes you can see close up. That's not good enough for me. How do I send you a photo so you can tell me how I've gone wrong? Send it to my email or post it to me on Twitter at Warhammer Weekly. My email is all over the place. When he says horrid, he means the brushstrokes are visible close up, but I want the finish to be really smooth and clear, as vehicles have bigger, flatter surfaces and any brushstrokes aren't good enough. All right. So if you've already got brushstrokes, it's going to be hard to back it out, but I'll give you some. I can still help you out. Go get yourself some 800 grit or like 1200 grit sandpaper from the auto store, from the auto parts store, and you can use that to sand very lightly on your vehicles. Now, like 1200 grit sandpaper is so smooth as to almost be not sandpaper, but it will have an effect. You just got to sit there and really carefully work it. And by the way, that's good advice before you start ever painting anything. Big vehicles are one of the things that like really almost demand an airbrush, because rattle cans just don't deploy paint evenly enough. It's just never going to be as perfect as it could be if you had an airbrush. Now, what I would say is if you're going to do that, if you're going to brush it on, I would really, and you're going to use a rattle can. Honestly, I would use rattle cans more carefully in like a zenithal style and be very light with it, and then use very thinned glazes on your vehicle from a big brush. Because if your paint is thin and very watery, you don't get brush strokes. I mean, brush strokes are thick paint drying with physical ridges left on. That's like glazes don't leave brush strokes for the most part, assuming you don't do something crazy. So if you had like an undershading and you just glazed the color on, almost like you were treating your paints like a candy coat, and you used even the rattle cans to sort of zenithal and target your highlights, your hotspots, your points of interest, I think you'd end up with a smoother effect. But that being said, hopefully those two ideas help you out. Yeah, so like an 800 or 1200 grit sandpaper, thinner paints throughout more layers, and undershading, and then thinner paints. If you want, you could, if you want to get really nuts, here's what I don't know for sure this would work, but I'll give you a suggestion. Don't just try this on your whole tank. Pick something else and try this on a smaller thing first. You can use matte varnish to fix inconsistencies in models. I'm going to do a hobby cheating on this at some point, on how you can fix like mold lines that are impossible to scrape or things like that. You can use matte varnish after you've painted the model to still fix it and then just kind of paint back over it. You rely on the fact that matte varnish has a physical presence to it, but it's still very thin and flows naturally, to smooth out and settle, right? You could do this on a base to see if it works or something, just like grab a base or something. But you could brush on some matte varnish and then redo a glaze over top of your green again. That might be enough. Again, try it on something small that isn't your whole tank first, but there you go. Those are all my ideas. Oh, okay, so Desmond is DACA. There you go. All right, very good. Yeah, you got to get those accounts combined, buddy. All right. Bring on more questions. Let's see what we got. I don't know what this is. So many questions. I'll have to see what people ask in video too. Okay. Am I going to make it to the Las Vegas Open? Do they need to bring the Golden Demon back to get you in? And Scott R says he's painting 15 orcs right now, fighting the good fight. Very good. Glad to hear you're fighting the war against the gray. So will I go to LVO? I'd like to. I will say that it's more like, it's probably like 60-40 right now that'll go. The problem is it's really close to Adepticon, and that's two, trips that both cost money. Las Vegas is a fair distance away from Ohio, where I live. But if Golden Demon is there, it's 100-0. I will be there. Period. End of story. There you go. I'd like to go, certainly. Okay. YouTube newbie says the rattle can coat paint smudged on the green. Maybe I didn't water the paint enough then. Also, I don't want to do crazy stuff like undershading and whatnot. It's not crazy stuff. It's simple stuff, brother. That's black spray paint, white spray paint out of a rattle can. But anyway, I understand. That's fine. Yeah, chances are the paint was just a little too thick. When you're trying to cover up like places where the metal got over, I will tell you right now, you're better to thin that paint a little too much, especially when you're dealing with something like you've got a spray base, whether out of a rattle can or out of an airbrush, and just, you know, doing like 10 layers to touch up that corner. I know that sounds silly, but like it doesn't take more than a second. You're like, layer, set to the side. It's going to dry in a minute. You come back, layer, and it just keeps everything nice and smooth. My thoughts for what they're worth, as which is probably very little as everything. Okay, I need a drink because I've been talking for like an hour straight here. All right. How do Chris Smith asks sarcastically, I assume, how do you paint your Nurgle goodness? Oh boy. I don't ever. I hate Nurgle. I have never painted a Nurgle model. I will never paint a Nurgle model. Ever. There you go. You can take that to the bank. That is a thing that will not be happening in the world that is me on this hobby journey. I will leave that to literally every other painter in the world who seems to be obsessed with Nurgle. So there you go. Seems like everybody's got this covered. You don't need me wading in the water. All right, more questions. Here we go. When painting with subassemblies, I always have the trouble gluing it together, or they have gaps when I'm done. Should I be covering up the connections before priming them or rubbing the paint off the connections? That's a great question. The answer is maybe, probably. It can't hurt. What I will say is that it's certainly not a bad idea, because it can be tough to fit it together. The answer is when you assemble it at the end in your subassembly, it doesn't necessarily mean you're done. You're still going to have to do some touch-up work afterward. But that minor amount of touch-up work takes 10 minutes. Trying to get into every nook and cranny around something like a screaming bell where things are completely hidden is going to be way more time. But the answer is, if you want to cover anything up, right there, your good old friend, your Tamiya masking tape. I like the 6mm variety. You can see that's about how much I have left. I've had this for a year. I use it quite frequently. You get a lot. And in fact, as a point of fact, I just tend to use the same piece over and over and over again. Like, here's one I have sitting next to my airbrush booth right now that I just tear strips off of, because who cares? It sticks for a while. And you don't want it to be hyper sticky because it could peel paint. You want it to be kind of old and not perfectly adhering. So yeah, covering up the sort of joints is a good idea. I don't know if I'd worry about rubbing them down. That's probably a bit much, and could, you know, paint can peel. You might get you could very easily damage things you don't want to hurt doing that. Silly putty is another good one. If you don't want to get the Tamiya tape, which by the way, this is I think $5 on Amazon. So silly putty is another good thing. Little piece of silly putty, tear off a little piece, put it over your connection joint. It'll stick the whole time, come right off. And on the bright side, it never actually peels paint off itself. It's also a great masking agent for airbrushing. Silly putty is great. Okay. YouTube newbie says he's the newbie for a reason. Well, that's all right, man. You can still be YouTube newbie and use some mid-level techniques. I believe in you, YouTube newbie. You can do it. YouTube newbie says when he's spraying and painting in subassemblies, he covers bits and plug holes with little bits of blue tack. Don't know what you Americans call blue tack. We call it blue tack. And that is also a great thing. So yes, I also keep some blue tack right next to me. I've done the same thing. Absolutely. Just covering a bit with a little bit of blue tack can be another great trick. That's absolutely correct. But yeah, it'll make your joints smoother in the end, like especially if something is a really tight joint where you have like literally like a you've got like a peg hole and something it just really tightly fits into. Like if you can dry fit it and it sticks normally without glue, you probably want to cover that up if it's in a subassembly, because it is not going to fit. That's going to happen. Okay. Desmond also points out silly putty is perfect for camo patterns with a brush and airbrush. Yes, I agree. Another great trick to do some very you can peel it off and just kind of spread it around and do fun camo patterns. It's an excellent point. Very fast camo patterns too that overlap each other in neat and organic ways. All right. More questions. Okay. So G Ambulance Service says, if GW had never produced models that required the mold line removal process, and then they announced that they were changing their manufacturing process so that their product would have mold lines, and so hobbyists now had to spend hours on preparation before painting their minis, do you think hobbyists would happily go along with this? No. Of course not. Because once you get something for free, you don't want to give it up ever. And, you know, I mean, that's just the way it goes. What I will say is that most manufacturers who are producing high quality miniatures are getting much, much, much better at hiding mold lines, or not even having them really there to begin with. I was reminded of this recently when I went from doing a group of dryads, which are mold line-orific. Holy Moses, is it everywhere? It is a plague on those dryads. To doing the new Kurnoth Hunters, which, I mean, I think I scraped a couple, but I mean, they were small, mostly out of the way, and easy. A fun tool for mold lines. Obviously, everybody knows you can just turn an X-Acto blade sideways, but if you're interested in more fun tools, you can get something like this, which is actually a little mold line scraper. And it's got two little blade ends on it. I actually find this rather useful, especially for doing larger mold lines, rather than trying to get the X-Acto. You can just literally like drag it along the mold line, and it really will just peel them right off. It's pretty great. It's a nice little tool for mold line removal. I don't remember who this is from, but if you search for like mold line scraper on Amazon, I think this thing cost me, again, maybe $6 or $7. So it was fun. It was a good deal. I'm happy with it. I mean, I still use an X-Acto if it's a tight spot or something, but yeah, it's a useful tool. But the short answer is no. And when you look at a lot of modern minis, most recent GW, Kingdom Death, Malifaux from Weird, it's not as bad. Most of the new Malifaux stuff, the mold lines are pretty minimal. Like I just put together the Misfire, which is the alternate sculpt Willy, and she had like a mold line on her hat, on the side of her hat, and one on like the side of one of her arms. I think that was about it, really, that I could tell at least. I mean, I really stared at her. Desmond says, I feel so stupid. I have one of those and I thought it was a sculpting tool. No, there is a mold scraper that is specifically for that. Although, if you want, I'll share another fun trick with you that you can use this mold scraper for, since you've got one and you talked about sculpting. When you're doing green stuff sculpting and you fill a large flat area, let's say like you're doing something that's a relatively big flat area, like you put on a small cloak or something, or you have a tabard or whatever, I don't know, and you've got it all done. Once it is completely dry, okay, I mean, like, let's just say 48 hours. Let's really talk about this being set. Okay, 24 minimum. You can take your mold scraper and you can very lightly go over the green stuff to roughen it up just a little, and it'll get rid of kind of the doughy texture of the green stuff and give it a little more natural texture to it. You're not really scoring it, I'm not saying that. You're not scoring the green stuff. That's a little heavier, and you can do that for different purposes. This is a slight bit of roughing. You can, and it'll really make your green stuff look more like the plastic that you put it next to once it's painted. So there you go. Another fun use for the mold scraper. You can do that with an X-Acto knife too, but I like the mold scraper for that. Okie dokie. More questions. Here we go. All right. So keep them coming, by the way, folks. We still got about another 15 minutes of questions, so get them in. I'm going to do this for a hard hour and a half, because otherwise I'll pass out eventually from asking too many questions, or answering too many questions. Okay. Next up, there was a question about how do you paint models in the dark? I don't mean not having enough light. I mean doing a night scene. So painting colors that are in shadow. Most people, when we paint miniatures, we tend to assume a sort of zenithal lighting pattern or close to it. The figs are usually in daylight, or the assumption is they're in daylight, and that the sun is somewhere between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. In other words, it's at, like, if you picture this as the whole horizon, this is the whole horizon, and this is noon, or here, this is noon, your light is somewhere coming from one of these angles, right? Okay. So when you're painting something that's completely in shadow, in darkness, or that's very heavily OSL, like the only light source is from the OSL, the object source lighting. So for example, something like this, I think is what he's talking about. So this was painted for the Crystal Brush contest, for the Cool Mini or Not Expo. It ended up taking second place overall, which I was very happy with. But you can see this. So I called this Alone in the Dark. There's no light here. There's a cover on the top of this. She's exploring the cave. The only light source is this sword, right? So this side of the miniature is in shadow completely, and this side almost looks normal, right? Okay. The answer is you need to paint in very low intensity colors. You need to knock the color out of things. So that usually means the addition of grays, colds, especially if your light source is cold. If your light source is blue or white, like the moon. The trick is our eyes tend to see nighttime scenes and think of nighttime scenes as being cold, because the light we have at night is the moon, which is a very pale blue light. And so what that does is turn everything gray, right? If you've ever seen somebody wearing a yellow shirt at night, it doesn't look yellow. It just looks gray. Most colors are muted in the dark, in moonlight, in blue light. So that's what you want to aim at. You take your colors and you want to sort of gray them down some, mute them. Your most intense colors, basically you need to have your point of light where the OSL is hitting, and then your most intense colors sit here, right? So where the light is diffused just enough to allow the color to get through. And then everything from here out is going to be gray. A grayer version, proceeding into a very dark version of what that is. And you want to stick to your cold shadows mostly if you're working in a blue light. So you stick to, like, you're using sort of a deep blue as your ultimate shadow color, like a super night blue. So for example, my go-to is Scale Color 75 Deep Blue, which is not the chess playing computer that beat that guy. No, just this color right here. I like that as a cold shadow. Okay. Omri says, any tips for building and painting dioramas? Oh boy. Yeah, raid the hardware store. There's number one. Home Depot or whatever your version of that is your friend. You know, like when you're thinking about dioramas, stuff like this stuff is your friend. These are Hearst Arts molds. You can use resin or plaster cast in this stuff. So this is one with like a lot of bricks and gates. This is one you probably can't tell, but this has like barrels and bins and campfires and stuff like that. You want to be able to cast your own stuff. Spackle paste is your friend. Something like this to do a bunch of basing material with and to mix with grit. This is like bark or something for interior potted plants. These are rocks. All of this stuff is useful. When you're thinking about planning the diorama, my answer would be, like I said, everything in arm's reach. When you're thinking about painting the diorama, my advice would be the first thing you need to get down is to think about your scene. Sorry, my dog has something she's not supposed to have. Hey. Look, come here. Trade you. Yeah, whatever. All right, anyways, sorry. Slight distraction there. But you got to think about the whole scene. So plot out your narrative. Think about what you want it to be. And here's the thing that's distracting me, by the way. Here, I'll bring. Hello. Say hi. There you go. All right. So think about your whole narrative and the scene that you want to set. And you have to think about how that's all going to be laid out. It's the most important part of any diorama is it can't just be figures sitting on a fun scenic base. That doesn't do anything. The dioramas that really grab people's attention are ones where the narrative is obvious from the beginning. So you really need to think about your story. At Gen Con, the diorama that took first place, for example, was a Nurgle converted Star Drake that was chasing a bunch of Space Marines through, like, away. They were sort of scattering. And you could see the sort of like fear of all the Marines as they ran in every direction from this thing. And there was like little Nurglings that were wearing Space Marine helmets and kind of dancing around and stuff. So it had a little bit of seriousness. It had a little bit of comedy. It had good conversions. The point being, you looked at it and it told a story, right? So there you go. Okay, you can get down. There you go. Now you all know what's distracting me. All right, let's see. Anything important in the way of building it, since it's a 3D scene? Yeah, I mean, you should think about layout. Certainly, you want to, think about how it's laid out, how the models are going to look. But in general, with a diorama, it's not meant to be viewed from every single possible angle. It's, so you don't need to worry about that as much. You can often have backdrops with dioramas, maybe not always. But you can sometimes have like a backdrop and it's meant to be viewed only from sort of 3 of the 4 sides. And that's all fine. But again, I think really the most critical piece of a diorama is setting the narrative and making sure that it's telling a story. Yeah, there you go. I hope that helps. Okay, do you have an easy way or preferred method of filling seam lines and sprue scarring? Yeah, sure. Either perfect putty or Vallejo plastic putty is my favorite thing. I just throw a little of this down, fill that in, let it dry, which it dries super fast, like 10 minutes. This is dry, and then just some light sand to sand it down. If there's still a little bit of a spot, get out the matte varnish, drop that over the top, let that dry. There you go. Pretty straightforward, really. Perfect putty's good. Plastic putty's good. The liquid green stuff works in a pinch. I've never been a huge fan of it. I like those putties better. They dry fast. They dry solid. They sand really easily, and they're very water soluble, so you can clean up extra mess really easily. Okay. There you go. Mickey says the cone cells in our eyes that recognize color don't work in the dark, so we actually only see gray and very low light. There you go. All right. Good questions. I like where everybody's head's at today. These have been some fantastic questions. Okay. Let's look here. Yeah. Somebody just says puppy. Yes, she is adorable. What can I say? She's a little pill. She had stolen a piece of my. She had stolen a piece of like my airbrush, not my airbrush itself, but of my a piece of metal I use to hold the airbrush. Because why wouldn't she? All right, so there you go. That's, I think, all the questions that I have right now. I'll give everybody just a minute to ask me some final questions if you have any. As I said, you can leave them in the post of the original video. You can throw them in the comments. You can put them in the Q&A if you've got that active. All of those things are fine. I will catch them wherever they are. All right, so I'll give a minute for everything to come in. I will, and while I'm waiting on anybody to leave one final question here, I will say this seemed like really fun, and there was a lot of questions, which was great. I'll try to post these. I think what I'm going to start doing is trying to do these regularly or semi-regularly so people can plan on it, prepare their questions. I'll look into facilitating having this post up very early so people can log their questions with me early. Certainly, if you'd like, you can leave comments down in this video. So if you're watching this not right this second, or even if you are watching right now and you didn't, there was a question you wanted to ask but didn't get a chance to, leave it down in the comments, and I will, like I said, I'll give you a short answer, but I can also record that then for the next time we do this. And I'll try to do one of these. We'll see what the we'll see what the timing looks like. But I thought this was great. This was a lot of fun. I really liked having the sort of interaction with everyone. And I hope that a lot of this advice was useful. I certainly want my main mission in this community, as most people who follow me know, is to is to fight the war against the gray, to help people paint miniatures, to get paint on miniatures, and to have fun doing it. That's what really matters to me. I love painting. This is something I'm absolutely passionate about, and anything I can do to help people or share that passion with all of you, I'm certainly happy to do. So there we go. Final note on the way out. I saw a lot of people saying, thanks. You're more than welcome. Thank you all for participating. I very much appreciate that. I really do. To everybody who asked questions, that is really awesome. Final note on the way out. Yes, that's right. Here he is again. Hey, Spirit of Durthu #2 in the painting competition. I will link it. I'll put the link in the description right as soon as this video is logged up when I close it down here in just a moment. You can go to that page or to the Facebook or to both because they both count. Give Spirit of Durthu #2, the black, white, blue, and fiery sword Durthu, a like if you like him, or a vote in the poll. I would certainly appreciate it. It's awesome. I thank you very much for the support. If you don't want to do that, hey, don't. That's perfectly fine. But what I would love is if you have somebody who you would like to, who you know is also looking for information, wants to be a better hobbyer, hey, share this with them. Share the video out there, share the channel. That's always the best thing you can do to support the channel. I really appreciate that. So for everybody who was watching, for everybody who asked questions, for all about you out there who watch this in the future, thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to the next time. And yeah, have a great day. We'll see you next time.